Artwork that reads as apolitical. We're going to be going through the work that Genevieve has made since her senior thesis show at university up to the body of work that she's making currently for the exhibition. But before we do that, can you tell us about why you chose to come to Berlin and what the residency you're doing consists of?
The residency I'm doing is pretty straightforward. I'm here for 3 months. I had an introductory show at Gallery Weekend. The gallery is just called Gallery 102. It's run by Anna Marie Laber. And so basically we just come here and it's like hit the ground running in terms of just working every day. Like you really are supposed to just, because within the first month, we had our first show, and so it's really focused on self-discipline, either getting yourself to the studio, or in my case, just getting myself to the library to research and starting working. So very studio practice focused residency.
Though you're mostly a multimedia artist working on your computer.
Yeah, so for me, it was helpful to have a studio when I was brainstorming and trying to lay out pictures and images, but I also do a lot of I'm either reading or on the computer for all of my work, so it's really, I can kind of be anywhere, which is nice, and it means I don't have to go to the studio every day, which is cool. And Berlin, it's a really, obviously an incredibly historically politically significant place for lots of reasons, for many reasons, but also, even in the time that I've been here, through not even planning myself, I've been invited to reading groups that happen to be reading the same things I'm researching. I've had friends that I haven't seen forever show up here who are artists. I think it's very central. So I was specifically trying to come here and apply to residencies here.
If you want to hit the first slide. We're going to start with this piece, which was for your senior thesis show, right?
Yeah.
And can you tell us about what we're looking at specifically?
So my senior thesis show, I was focusing on languages failing to express mourning and suffering. And I was specifically looking at post-Holocaust writing, as well as artists that have used asemic language to express historic trauma. And one of the things that I made was a program, just a little Twitter bot API that just live streamed every time someone tweeted "Rest in Peace" on Twitter, and then it would just play it as a continuous stream. So I have many samples of this, just one of them.
So one of the common threads from this piece all the way through your current work is that you are often working with text, and you started at Reed initially in their BFA writing program, correct?
Yeah, well, I wanted to. I was going to be an English major with a specialization in creative writing, and I just I felt there was a lot more freedom in the art program, and I realized that I could do that and continue with creative writing as well. And I felt in combining those, I could honestly spend more time focusing on the creative arts than I would be if I was studying English. And it also allowed me to bring in, spend more time reading the specific types of theory that I wanted to read versus spending a lot of time, in an English program, which is incredibly valuable for people who want to study those things. But I think for me, having that time, actively practicing creation was extremely helpful.
And the other thing the other thematic consistency that starts with this piece is that you're taking this moment that's hyper personal for people who are tweeting it. Mm-hmm. Someone they know just died. Yeah. They're upset about it. But you're able to take it because it's on the internet, it's mediated, and bring it into an almost anonymous crowdsourced kind of setting. And so what about that exchange for you is intriguing?
Well, I think one of the things that was really, really important to me that actually was quite hard to do given the API models I was using was get rid of the person's screen name on the screen so it didn't come up when I was playing the stream. It took me forever to figure out how to do that, and it was very important to me that I didn't have that there because I didn't want to be and here's this person's Twitter handle that you can look them up at. Because I know there's a lot of people who are well, if this person puts it out online, they deserve whatever for it, but I don't really I don't know. I personally don't really agree with that, but I do think that, like, people who are expressing grieving through Twitter, like, they are, you know, there's a certain sense in which it is public, but that doesn't mean their identities need to be public. I also think that, like, I'm really interested in, for instance, like, Memorial Day was 2 weeks ago, which is, you know, American holiday for honoring, like, soldiers who have died. And I'm really interested in the way in which, like, problems can occur when the state is mediating when we mourn and when we memorialize, and finding ways to have more sort of like free-form, independent forms of memorialization was one thing I thought about a lot with this project. And I was actually looking at a lot of the anti-monument, anti-memorial movements in Germany specifically when I was researching this.
I'm going to go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry. That one moment. Sorry, there we are.
Following that, this is kind of a similar process where you found images on Google Maps.
Yeah. It's a sort of interesting thing for me where up until the project I'm currently working on recently, like, I tended to make work that was very depersonalized. So this was this project where, you know, we went on a lot of road trips and was driving a lot that year specifically. And when I was driving through places that I knew I would never come back to or come back through that way, I would go on Google Maps and I would take screenshots of just landmarks I thought were interesting, but I knew that I would never remember or never really keep in mind. I was really fascinated with the idea at the time that those were probably actually very important places to someone, but they were completely meaningless to me, or they would be meaningful to me in that time, but just never be meaningful to me again. And I was thinking a lot about how just sort of the act of forgetting places and what it means to, like, move on from somewhere, like a physical space, and just never think about it again was very fascinating to me. And it, you know, it does tie back to this idea of the stream, like you're moving through life in this sort of stream-like way. It's there's a quote that I put on the back of that couch that's sort of very specifically about that. You can't see it particularly, but I mean, I would need to read it, but it was from just a short paper I wrote about this.
There's something in this piece that I think is seen in a lot of artworks, right? Because the moment that really doesn't matter to you or anyone, there are normal things that are accessible to anybody, but by making them an object, then suddenly you're investing a lot of value and you're interacting with it more as a representation than you ever would have in real life.
I think I have a hard time letting go of things. Just in general. It's like, honestly, like, now I can sort of look back at this project with distance, but when I was making it, I had this, like, anxiety that, like, there were spaces that didn't matter to me, or, like, things that I'd done in my life, or spaces that I'd been that I no longer cared about, which actually made me quite anxious. And I think there's a little bit of, you know, I think it was a little bit of mourning. This couch is a little bit of being in mourning for, like, things that I no longer care about, or places that I no longer care about, and, like, not so much feeling guilty, but just, like, feeling sad. You know, the paper that I wrote corresponding to it was just kind of about how telling myself that it's okay to not care about, you know, that one road that I took driving into New Orleans that I'm never going to see it again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to be really upset that I don't care.
And this is your couch.
Yeah, it was my couch. No longer my couch.
You had it upholstered by...
I had it upholstered by this place in Gresham, who we'll return to, who were really great. And then they bought a bunch of this fabric from me, which was chill. Yeah.
We have the next slide. And this... you might want to...
Yeah, you can click that video.
Just click through to it.
This is going to be the part that's hard for me, which is hearing my own voice.
And a preface to this piece is that you originally gave us as a poetry performance.
Yeah, I gave this as a poetry performance where the video was played and I was reading live during it. Maybe we can just start it and then... I will not remember this. Oh, you
is
mean...
there sound?
Yeah.
There is no sound in this video. It is set in a narrow living room. The left wall is covered with a 2-level round bookshelf. On top of the bookshelf is a TV. Only the bottom rim of the TV is visible on camera. Behind the TV is an exposed brick facade. The second level of the bookshelf is a DVD player, and the first contains a VCR. There are also several other boxes and electronic units on the shelf. Across from the bookshelf is a metal table, the very edge of a beige couch, and a leopard-spotted box. Next to the table and pushed against the wall, directly across from the viewer, are two boxes, one beige and one white. On top of the beige bookshelf is a web camera. The setting for the video is consistent throughout the whole
it's like you're giving
minute
like
and
a
12
standard art
seconds of
historical like
Yeah.
deep
You
description.
unclear it
I think
first.
this is worth
You
that.
can
You
only
guys will
see the
see
top.
this is like
Limited cat visibility and unusual texture.
most
A
paintings
strange,
can't
weighty
live up
cotton
to
ball
this
bouncing in the distance.
video,
Its density and structural ethereal. It would be fluffy cat playtime in slow motion.
which is the title
As
of
the
the
cat
video.
bounds forward, the video slows down. Halos of ample fur ripple along the cat's back. Its thickness and coverage make it difficult to distinguish any separation in the cat. The layers of shaggy white conceal his haunches, shoulders, and neck, combining into one endless bouncing ruff. The cat glides as though he is just one solid but weightless part. But you start to notice ricochets. You start to notice lag time. You notice seismic shockwaves of fur on impact with the ground. The cat is distinct from itself, flinging itself into the air. The cat is not just one, it is many cats. It is one whole cat fracturing. It is one whole cat expanding. With each bounce, the cat grows, tufts of fur slowly drifting outwards, its small ears drifting higher and farther apart. The cat has little black eyes, and I don't understand how they work. It starts as a cotton ball, and then it gets bigger. The cotton ball has gone nuclear, its nebulous perimeter expanding as the cat leans back on its haunches. Horror pours over the couch and clogs the door as it leaps. Fur swallows up the TV. Its neck and head extend forever beyond the camera. A fluffy eternity passing out of...
So even though this is a video and it's not just a flat image, it's still primarily about the interaction of language and
Yeah.
image.
There's no sound in this video.
For this project, I was asked to do this poetry collective called Fog Machine in Portland, which I actually think was moved, but they asked me to perform live at one of their readings, like do like sort of an art performance, and I was sort of trying to do what I do with text and image, but through performance, and wondering if I could affect change on like a moving video as it was doing the same thing it's normally doing, like if somehow through like reading above it I could actually like change it to suit more how I feel. And I really like cats. Especially that cat.
There's a lot of humor that comes out of it, mostly because you're giving it the kind of attention that we would normally give to a Renaissance painting, for instance.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of thing that we actually want and do have in our life
Yeah.
constantly. Like we're constantly
Yeah.
showing cat videos, so it's interesting that no one really slows them down and takes them seriously.
I
so
do.
That's
Yeah.
also like a big factor.
Yeah. I watch cat, like I really like cat videos. Like this isn't fake, this is how I think about them all the time. It's completely organic.
Analytically.
Yeah, like
What does that do for you besides giving you that humorous version?
they just, I mean, like for me, I think it was a way of like appreciating something that like was like small and insignificant, but actually like, you know, it actually could be very big. Like it's like so many people have seen the original of this video is literally someone who breeds Persians, which is a weird thing to do, made a video of her filming her cat and called it Fluffy White Cat Playtime in Slow Motion, which is an amazing, like that's an amazing set of words. That's just a great set of words. I'm obsessed with it. And like on top of that, like it seems like this really mundane small thing, but it's actually like so many people watched that video, and it was put on Tumblr, and then it was like reposted millions of times. So it's actually, it's a very large thing. The cat is literally expanding and taking over the world.
Likely seen more than any piece of artwork.
Yeah, no, totally, and probably like I mean I like got probably like to be real like got way more out of like watching this video over and over and over again than most paintings I've ever looked at. Sorry, not sorry. Oh.
Do you want to go to the next slide? And so this project comes from the story of Kitty Genevieve There's recently a documentary out about it, but
Yeah, made by her brother, which I really, really recommend. I think it's called Witness, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So Kitty Genevieve was a gay woman who lived in New York in the 60s, and she was murdered. And her murder basically prompted an entire school of psychological studies. Because according to a completely false newspaper report that came out at the time, 32 to 34 people in her neighborhood heard her being raped and murdered and didn't respond. And which created the study of the bystander effect, which schooled this whole sort of set of research that, what's interesting about it is the research did prove that people in groups, if no one else is responding to someone being attacked, are not going to respond to being also not going to respond. But while proving this, it literally criminalized and almost criminalized like an entire neighborhood in New York, and sort of destroyed this neighborhood's reputation, made everyone in that neighborhood seem like awful people. It was the foundation for a lot of racism that then, like a new justification for like racism towards like minority groups living in cities through like the language of like urban people have lost their humanity. It basically, like, while it did sort of launch these successful psychological experiments, it did so at the cost of sort of vilifying a completely innocent group of people. And
it turned out not to be.
It's not wasn't true at all. So maybe at most 2 people saw what was happening, and one of them was completely intoxicated, and the other person was a gay man who was was constantly harassed by the police. So that's the other thing about the neighborhood that this took place in, is it was a predominantly gay neighborhood. At that time, all of the gay people in that neighborhood were under constant police supervision, so the idea of calling the police to them was actually incredibly alienating. And on top of that, marital rape was still legal in New York, and a lot of people would see fights happening between men and women and would assume they were in a relationship together and wouldn't do anything because even the state of New York thought that that was okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we look back at this period today, when we think about the Central Park jogger scandal, which Donald Trump jumped all over and still talks about to this day, even though they've been exonerated, and none of them were actually involved with the crime. We think about Hillary Clinton's super predators, which was completely debunked. And so what was it about us in the States in the 60s and 70s needing this myth of kind of urban depravity and violence?
I mean, obviously, it made it, you know, guilt by association is it's such a useful tool for policing, you know, to be like, anyone in this community who is tangential to this crime is also guilty by being part of this community. That is an incredibly useful, like, tactic for controlling a group of people. And I think that was really important. And it was really powerful, and it like really moved people. And honestly, one of the driving forces behind it was the editor, this editor of, I think it was maybe the New York Times at the time. There's more info about it in the next screen, who was just this horrible man who was extremely homophobic. You know, he's one of the people that refused to print the word AIDS, like, up throughout the 80s, like, minimizing the problem. He, you know, so for him, making this neighborhood seem like a disgusting place, you know, this neighborhood that was predominantly gay and black, is exactly what he wanted. That was, like, what he wanted to get out of it. You know, he was later asked, like, why didn't you know that, like, the whole 32 witnesses is incorrect? And he was like, 232, like, what does it matter? The paper sold, you know? But yeah, it was what he wanted, like, to make that part of New York seem, through one crime that happened there by someone who was clearly very, very mentally ill, to make that whole neighborhood seem criminal. That's, for him, was a major accomplishment.
So you're using 2 jokes here, one being that people in galleries are literally bystanders, and won't usually ever interact with the artwork, no matter how much you tell them to. Yeah. And then B, that when you are looking out a window and you think that you're using your own sensorial faculties or something, you're actually still seeing your mental
projection,
prejudice that you might be getting from reading or from stories that are circulating.
Yeah, I think for me the window was really important because it wasn't just this like play on like the people looking through the window, but it was also this another thing that you don't get as much here is when you were walking down the hallway, it was kind of like you were walking down the hallway with windows, but it was also sort of made it look like you were going to like a really poorly funded museum with like shitty glass panels with like historical, like badly made historical documents behind it. And it was a way that this thing that's interesting about the story now is that many people know what happened, and know that what really happened, but because it provided all of this like scientific psychological research, no one really cares. Which is why, like, just, you know, it happened 2 years ago. Her brother went out and was like, her brother, who's in a wheelchair, he's a Vietnam vet, went out and made a documentary about it himself, just sort of like clear the name of his neighborhood, even though the evidence was all out there. But he like had to do that because literally, like, no one was listening, and because it, like, the academia outweighed the truth.
It's also a better story if it's the fake story is much better.
Well, like the fake story is better, but like his story is amazing, and the fact that he did that is amazing, and it's a really good documentary.
Is there? Can you go to the next slide, please? Cool. No, this is good.
Okay, yeah.
So this project was called X Fantasy, and one thing that you write on a piece here is that I can't make girl art anymore. So what does that mean to you?
So like for me, I was thinking a lot about like, I was sort of stressing out about like whether or not, I got caught in this sort of like cycle of thought about whether or not like fantasies that I had when I was like a teenager were really something organic that I had, or something that was like sold to me, like things that I wanted. Like, why did I want a boyfriend so badly? Why did I want to do these certain things? Was it something that I was told I wanted, or was it something that I wanted organically? And I was thinking a lot about how like one of the biggest markets in America is like girls between the age of like 9 and like 16. Huge market. If you can tap that market, you're gonna make millions of dollars. And so people spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what those people want, and then that manipulates what they want. And I think I was trying to make all this art, and I realized there was this thing where it's like, actually, like I'm not that age anymore. I can't make art from that perspective. Like, nothing, there's no way. And I think like the reason that that's in so big in the piece is that there's no way, even though I'm making art having to do with people of that age slightly, and me at that age, I'm never going to be able to answer any questions whatsoever about what people are actually thinking at that age. And even if I was to talk to someone, you know, that's not a valid way to understand that. So I think that was just really important to me.
So is this bottom stuffed animal kind of about the outside?
Yeah, I think that bottom stuffed animal is, to me, it's like, well, it's like interesting. So both of those stuffed animals are a little bit about like how things that you like can have as these comfort objects are like sort of always going to sort of be permeated by the culture that maybe you think you're protecting yourself from. So it's this sort of like, it goes back into that cycle again of
this is just to be clear, a Hitachi wand.
So it's kind of, it looks like a Hitachi wand. It actually, I wasn't totally going for that, but then when I made it, I was like, yeah, that's totally what that is. But it also has this like little like friendly elephant head, and you could imagine that it's also like, I don't know, some creature that's like bouncing along, you know? I was thinking about like the Winnie the Pooh, like heffalumps, you know? Like a little bit, and you thought they were like Eeyore and Piglet, which I hadn't even thought of, which was really funny. But people's like responses to those also are really, really funny. I have a friend who's the pink one, he like won't even look at it. He thinks it's like so creepy, and that's one of my favorite things that I've like ever made. I love that thing.
So this could be a child's bed. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be a place of safety, but the curtains that you've made are all from imagery of video games that
Yeah.
are specifically targeted to them, and then
The creatures in there, I think it's like interesting because the creatures in there should be like stuffed animals. They should be sweet, but they all have to sort of like overarching, like not so much like threatening. I think the thing about it is it's not like threatening sexuality, but it's like hidden sexuality or non-explicit sexuality or sexuality that doesn't really have any kind of like cost to it, but it's like a preparation for something to come, which I think, yeah.
Could we go to the next slide, please?
Yeah, so that's the main sheet from the bed where you got the, I can't control it anymore.
And on top you have images from interviews that you did with furries. What's a furry? You did tell.
Yeah, so there's actually several types of furries. There's people who are just really interested in drawing comics of sort of anthropomorphic animals. And then there's people who want to sort of become those animals. They want to live those lives they spend a lot of money to make these big suits that sort of, that they can like step into the role of like living and like becoming these sort of characters that they create for themselves. And I think it's interesting. There's definitely like a whole range of things. One of the most, I think, like, you know, if you want to, like, if you're an illustrator and you want to actually make money, if you draw a furry art, you'll get paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's like a very lucrative business if you can like market yourself right. But yeah.
And again, it's about the anonymity that the internet provides, but
yeah,
in this case, it's
but
more
also
than
it's
seeking
about,
it out.
yeah, it's about also about making community and meeting each other. Like it's definitely like a social thing. It's an incredibly social thing. I think more so than a lot of other like more mainstream like internet subcultures. You know, like I don't think.
How did you go about interviewing them? How did you find them?
Okay, so first I went on Reddit, which was a huge mistake. That was terrible. And people were like not down to talk to me, and there was a lot of like, because I was asking a lot of questions. I was interested in speaking to like younger furries, especially like younger women who are furries, and they were just like, why would you want to talk to women? Don't like project your like social justice warrior politics onto us. It was bad. But then I went onto these Facebook groups and I actually found a lot of people who were younger and furry and queer, or furry and like femme furries, and they were really down to talk, and they really like a lot. There was honestly like more people who I wanted to interview than I had time to interview at all. And it was honestly it was pretty great. Like talking to them, it was like super. It's interesting because I think there's one of the stereotypes people talk about with furries is that they all might be slightly autistic, and that's like a sort of shitty stereotype that people spread. But which is, you know, I talked to some people who talked about how like being in a fursuit made it easier for them to interact with a lot of people. But I heard, you know, as much as it was like people being like, I don't understand other people, there was also a certain sense of like when I walk around in my normal life, I know that I'm hyper aware of these social expectations. Like there are all these social expectations and I'm hyper aware of them and I just can't meet them. And so this is a way of no longer having to engage with these social expectations, because if, you know, I'm a giant cartoon animal, I've already broken the biggest taboo there is to break. I'm no longer human. And now, you know, like you can't have any expectation of me beyond like being a giant cartoon animal. So I thought that was like really fascinating. And I also thought it was like a really, because I was thinking about these stories that like girls are told, these sort of fantasy stories that like teach them to fantasize in a lot of ways. But then I also really wanted to make space for the ways in which like escapism and fantasy like can save people's lives, or just really like make their, you know, not save people's lives, but make their lives worth living, you know?
Yeah, and this is an image you made on Photoshop and you had printed on
on a bed sheet, yeah, like a fluffy bed sheet.
Grizzly. And these were the images appropriated from iOS
this
games,
iOS video game. Yeah, it's the images taken from an iOS video game, and also this horrendous fancy photographer who is really exploitative of women. But
what's the text from? Is it also?
The text is from those video games. Those video games are actually what launched me into this project and thinking about like gender in this way and the ways in which like marketing towards women in this way, because these video games are very bizarre. Like I can't even describe, like, basically all the premise is always there's a young girl and her life is very mundane and she's incredibly pure, and then something happens to her and she meets like a group of young men, and it's like the game is like which of the guys do you end up with, and then suddenly her life becomes really like magical and like exciting, and she like escapes from this mundanity into this like fantasy world, which is like tons of really negative sexual encounters, but they're like viewed as positive in the game. It's really, and they're so high octane to look at. It's like more than anime, more than anything I've ever looked at before. It's all these like really bright colors, and the games of course trick you into spending money. The idea is that they'll get really addicted to these games and like to buy extra levels or to move faster through the game, to unlock extra scenes with like different dudes. They'll spend money on their phones.
And she's kind of doing some furry.
Yeah, she's doing some furry things. So
and like a powerful.
Powerful. There's that comes. I was also when I was younger, I was really, I was like a teenager, I was like really into fantasy, and I had this really like there was like I didn't understand why all of the weird. I read tons of fantasy novels. They were all written by men. I didn't know why they made me uncomfortable. They made me uncomfortable because there was a lot of shit like that in it. But I didn't know like how to like face the fact that was making me really uncomfortable. Also the fact that it was making me like constantly like measure my body up to these people, like, all the time. Like I was like, I can never be this like fantasy like princess warrior because I'm not skinny enough, and that's a real goal.
That feeds into a talk you gave right before you gave her. If we could get the next slide, please.
That's more of my furry interviews. Yeah, with those people. Chill furries.
And one
last
more.
year was the convention of these furries in the Astral, and you could see people in these costumes running around for a week.
Oh, wow.
And I think even McDonald's right around the corner, like, had a big thank you message for all of them, like, going every week was very fun to see them walking around in the streets.
There's a furry or a human pup in like a current advertising campaign that's in the Ubon. For keys, bats, or bats. Anyways.
Apparently Germany has the highest number of furries, doing more than any other country, according to some statistic I read. So, there you go. Thank you, guys. Yeah, one more slide.
Great. And so, this image is from Olympia.
Yeah,
this is and it's here because you gave a talk right before you came here on the connection between health and fascism.
So, looking at subcultures, and like even in the furry subcultures I was researching, I was like, you can't really dive into subcultures like that on the internet without running into the alt-right, without running into neo-fascists. And a lot of people are talking about that right now, and it wasn't that interesting to me to have that conversation, but one thing that was interesting to me was talking about the sort of roots of like sort of actual, what I see as ideological fascism in communities that, are actually very mainstream. So one of them, I looked at two of them. I looked at the art world and I looked at the fitness community. And with the fitness community, it's so glaringly obvious. You have the fetishization of ideal bodies. You have the idea that to be strong is both pure and natural. Like, this idea that like there is like an ideal body that can be like attained. You also have, I think, that space providing people with things they need. Like, with CrossFit, you have like community, you have like a sense of leadership, you have all of these things that are actually very addictive, and like people want to seek them out. But it is like for these, the connection between, I think nothing is more, like, the connection between, like, health and morality is deeply disturbing to me, and, like, I think I was exploring that, and I think another thing is I started to see a lot of connections between that and the art world, where people also have this, like, sort of fetishization of beauty, this, like struggling to attain something, like, pure and natural. You have the whole idea of originality, and then also, and then if you look at what's happening in the art world now, you have things like the LD50 show, there's actual like really dark philosophy that's being fed back into the art world, which people come to seeking beauty and community and creativity and something wonderful and pure, which I think one thing that people don't talk a lot about is like, that's something that the ideology of fascism like pretended to speak to, and one of the reasons it was appealing to people was for this like pursuit, it's like if you watch the Leni Riefenstahl films, it is this like pursuit of beauty and strength and power and and like purity and a return to nature.
Highly aestheticized.
Yeah, very aestheticized, and I think that's like, people think of it as just this like dark, thing with no little appeal, but when you come down to it, you have to recognize that it's a very politically it's extremely abstract, but aesthetically and spiritually it's actually very concrete, and it's similar things that we seek when we're checking ourselves out in the mirror, and it's like a similar thing we seek when we're seeking like beauty in an art gallery.
And so this is what you were thinking about when you came here and started making your body of work. Next slide. And so this is a project called Genevieve and the Hydra.
Yeah.
And it is a 15-image text. There's 15 images that have text with them, and it'll be a broadsheet publication that's a takeaway at the gallery later this month.
Yeah.
And there'll also be images of the broadsheets. And these were made in Photoshop and
design,
text.
yeah.
And can you tell us about the narrative? It's loosely based on Hercules' second labor, where he dispatched the Hydra.
Yeah, and it's loosely based on that and the like sort of generic hero's tale of someone venturing into like another land, be it like the underworld, be it like fairyland, or something like that to complete a task, which is like this sort of very traditional like fairy story. Except I sort of am both the hero in the story, but I'm also this other protagonist, which is the sort of like voice of doubt and like concern that's like and worry that's constantly surrounding the hero throughout. And it's in the story that voice becomes very feminized, but like it's also and that's the voice that I identify with the most, and it's sort of the voice that's like watching the hero the entire time. I've thought of it a little bit. I don't know if you guys have ever played Zelda, the like Link Navi. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so I feel like that's kind of this sort of like two people journeying together to like sort of complete this like mythic task. And to me, it's kind of a metaphor of people, and it's like a metaphor of people exploring sort of political ideology and noticing for the first time, you at a certain age, you notice for the first time that the world's like, there's something's not right. Your expectations of what you should have don't match up to what you actually get. And I invent kind of this space called the in-between, which is the space that like a lot of political ideology, to me it's like this sort of, this, not only like this space that, it's like kind of like the underworld or fairyland, but it's actually the space that political ideology and political theory like take place in. So it's like a physical space that embodies the development of like one's own politics. And so the story is just people journeying, these two people like journeying through that, and yeah. And
so tell us about the imagery that you selected.
So I used a lot of it. So I think this is a map of Athens, ancient Athens, and I also have pictures from the juniper tree, which is this really horrific fairy tale, as well as pictures from the sort of the fairy tale of the Silky, and they're all sort of fairy stories that have to do with like, I guess just like what is this specifically slide is it has to do with like what's expected of women and what role they have to fill, and like all of the actual like trauma that has to do with that and the ways that's actually like worked into society in this extremely manipulative way. This slide specifically is about kind of like how the hero becomes the hero. So it's about a mother, there's a classic thing in a fairy story where a couple won't be able to have a kid, and the mother will go and she'll like pray, or she'll like wish for a kid, she'll do something to be able to have a child, and it comes at this like cost. But the twist in this story is she only wants to have a kid if it's a kid who has this sort of awareness of the same political trauma that she does.
So in the story, you're working with the what is and the what should be, and in between is the Hydra that you're trying to dispatch.
Yeah. And
you're talking about how every time that you go off the Hydra's head, that you come back. So is this a kind of condemnation of reform efforts, or is it
I think
a revolutionary call?
It's a common condemnation of like simple-minded reform, or like simple-minded like one-sided political analysis. It's sort of it's less a condemnation of like what people do than just sort of an observation on most political strategies. I think one thing that the story hasn't gotten to yet, I'm still, working on it. I actually think it's going to be a much longer project than the 3 months I was here. But it's sort of an observation of some of the ways in which, like, people, they will they'll notice, like, all the things that are wrong in the world around them, and they'll, like, sort of go into this space of analysis, and they can often come out with incredibly conservative views. Then you'll have, and I think that's, like, one thing that I think about a lot is that, people who will start from a place of being like, I don't have enough, like, something's not right, are going to end up in a place that actually mimics some of the worst, like, historical patterns of, like, political ideology that, like, we've ever seen, like, if they go, like, through this political journey. And I think one thing with the Hydra, the sort of myth of the Hydra, right, is that if you cut off its head, like, 2 heads will, like, grow in its place. And it's sort of for me, that's, like, a metaphor for the ways in which, like, oftentimes, like, people's, like, political solutions that they put forward are almost, like, in some ways, like, unintentionally worse than the situation they started through, like, through this sort of, like, dogmatism or, like, not carefully, like, thinking things through, and an over allegiance to, like, one political method over another.
So the way that Hercules solves this is he calls on Ionolis.
Yeah.
And they take them down. They take the Hydra down together.
Yeah.
In a coalition.
Interestingly, yeah, Hercules basically uses his slave to defeat the Hydra, which I think is, like, another thing that is complicated, or not complicated, it's just fucked up. But, like,
some people say cousin, some people say lover.
Lover, yeah, complicated. So, yeah. But it's this, like, young man that was basically, they were like, here, take this kid with you.
Yeah.
Drug. So I think, but for me, like, there's this question, though, of, like...
Or how does the narrative resolve?
It hasn't resolved yet. I think there's a thing that I go into where, like, a little bit more, like, later in the narrative where, as they're wandering around this place, they're not alone. They're with all of these other people who are also searching to kill whatever it is that created the in-between, and there are people there who have much stronger ideologies. So the hero is just this driving force. They're just the person that's like, something's fucked up, I need to fix it. Something's fucked up, I need to fix it. Whereas, like, my character is this voice of, like, I want there to be a better world, but I don't really know what I'm doing. This doesn't seem right, and I'm not sure what's happening. And on the way, they encounter all these people who seem to have some clue of how to kill the monster. So I think there's, like, quite a few, like, characters they, like, sort of meet along the way. And I think... I don't think that it's going to conclude with them killing the Hydra. I don't think they're going to get there, but I think it's more like of a recounting of, and I even say this in one of the first things that I read, it's more of a recounting of, like, pitfalls and mistakes than it is of a story of success.
Cool.
Because obviously, I don't actually know how to kill a Hydra.
And they can get this at your show.
Yes.
On the 22nd.
On the 22nd. Yeah. And then I'm doing a reading on the 24th.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone has questions.
And thank you all.
Sure,
and thanks for hosting us. I'm going to stay here and drink a beer, so you can ask me. Or you can ask me now.
Another question. In that political metaphor, Hercules and Ionolis in the second, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're the Tories and DUP fighting against.
Okay, I'm not going to shut up, you know. Anyone have any other questions that are not that one?
Why is it important for you to delve into this sort of mythology that for, like, a lot of viewers will be somewhat foreign? Like, it seems like a lot of your other work involves things that are more related to pop culture and sort of common popular interest, where it's just like has these associations with, like, whatever,
Academia, yeah.
intelligentsia. Why is it important for you to use that particular mythology?
I want people to take me seriously. No, and they didn't take me seriously when I was making work about furries. But no, I think for me, one of the things actually is that a lot of, you think that might not be important for pop culture, but, like, I mean, even people in the alt-right now are like obsessed with learning about this stuff. They're very concerned, like, and I mean, as were the fascists back in the day, they were very concerned with the ancient Greeks. They're very concerned with mythology. They're very concerned with these things that are actually, when called upon by someone with those political inclinations, can give meaning to any kind of politics that they want. A lot of the images that I use from this are, so this is this Soviet sci-fi story, but then there's also C.S. Lewis reference in here because he's definitely kind of fashion. But like, I think, it's funny because people will be like, no one's paying attention to that, no one's thinking about that, but actually, like, lots of people are, and lots of people are aware of it, and you might not think are aware of it, and like, things like that can be easily used by anyone to make any political point because they seem to have so much power, but like that meaning can be construed in any way. I use a lot of symbols from tarot in here because I think it's like an interesting example of the ways in which like we just apply meaning to stuff we don't really understand and like potentially doesn't have any meaning in the first place, no offense to anyone. But like I think that there is this like very like strange thing where like even us, it's like I'm a leftist, like, but even people in my milieu will be like, they'll like try to seek some kind of authorization for themselves or like anything like what they want to do from some sort of like mystic abstract. And I think that is something that I'm trying to tap into, and this need to like find this like sort of like mystical other power outside of ourselves to justify what we just want to do, when you should probably just do it. Like, so that's one reason that I'm looking at those things. Yeah.
Thinking about fantasy and politics, what do you think about conspiracy theory?
I think conspiracy theory is really interesting. I actually have a whole thing that I write in there about the witches in the in-between. And basically the role of the witches is that they go around, and when people stumble into the in-between, if they don't actually have political convictions and they're just thinking of random stuff, the witches will collect their thoughts and boil them, and create these vapors that go back up into the world and create conspiracy theories. Yeah, so, yeah.
So where those are coming from.
Yeah, so... so I think a lot of, I think conspiracy theories, the thing is, conspiracy theories become toxic ideology. Conspiracy theories become Alex Jones, they become anti-Semitism, they become, even, the bystander effect thing. In some ways, that was a conspiracy theory that defranchised, almost all of New York City, conspiracy theories they seem vapid, they seem like mist, but then they actually take on all this power if we don't actually pay attention to them.
And they never go away.
No, you can't disprove them, is the other thing, ever. You just have to sort of know which ones are right and wrong. And that is mostly, and if you don't, I know, I'm lucky I have a certain amount of education, so I feel like I can discern between them, but even, now we have all of these people in America who are obsessed with tracing this whole Russia thing. They just think about it all the time. And they're the same people that would be calling, different conservatives crazy for whatever conspiracy theory, but now it's like all they talk about and think about no matter what's happening in front of them. And, that's bizarre.
They're willing to believe anything.
Yeah, anything that anyone says. Rachel Maddow said that she had these tax leaks and they all flipped out, and she obviously didn't have them completely, and then they were all really disappointed.
Louise Mensch is on the front cover of the New York Times somehow.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Cool.
This won't seem like a serious question, but it kind of is. It's just what is your relationship for you, this desire to never create apolitical art and cat videos?
I feel very cynical about cat videos. Well, I think for me, the cat video one it was sort of this art about being maybe this is cheating, but just here's this thing that you think is stupid, but actually it's really meaningful too, and I can make it into something big. I can make it into a big thing. I can make it into a performance. It's actually part of a series of videos. in which I sort of go from this cat video to this sort of longer video of capybaras, to this much longer video of this sort of YouTube celebrity, really controversial YouTube celebrity walking through her really mundane life, and like while she's walking around, I sort of transform her like through, or attempt to transform her through my words through these stages of being like this like childhood person to this like slowly this like incredibly powerful sorceress like as I'm talking. And I don't know if it works a lot. That one's like, I would play it, but it's like 7 minutes long. But it's sort of this way in which for me it's like, I think that it's pretty political to show someone a picture and be like, actually you're not looking at the thing that you're looking at, you're looking at this thing that I'm telling you that you're looking at. And I'm going to take this thing that's not important and make it seem larger than life. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for coming.
That's like the first person I've ever done about my I also have been stuck so much with my big workshop project. Not a done project. So like literally all last night I was like most like working on it. So yeah. Yeah, I think it's also just like, you know, for me, like I know it's just flower. I'm being like,
That's not so funny.
but you know, I have that with the essay.